William Thomas Riker was a noted Starfleet officer, perhaps best known for his long assignment as first officer under Captain Jean-Luc Picard on board the USS Enterprise D, and later the USS Enterprise E. In 2379, he finally accepted a promotion as captain of the USS Titan. In 2361, a transporter accident resulted in 2 Rikers, with each one being identical to the other. Their personalities and memories were the same up to the point of the duplication. The other Riker eventually decided to use his middle name and became known as Thomas Riker. William Thomas Riker was born in 2335 to Kyle and Betty Riker in Alaska on Earth. His distant ancestors were from the mainland North America, including Colonel Thaddeus Riker, who fought in the American Civil War. Betty, his mother, died when Will was only 2 years old, leaving his father to raise him alone. The Rikers remained in Alaska at Betty's wish. The only thing which kept Kyle going was Will, but he did not feel as if he could discuss the situation with him. Even when Will was older. Starfleet Academy. Will Riker entered Starfleet Academy in 2353. During his time at the Academy, his superintendent was a Vulcan, who had taken the time to memorize the personnel files of each and every cadet. Upon graduation in 2357, Riker was ranked 8th in his class. Early Starfleet career. The Pegasus. 7 months after graduation, Ensign William Riker's first posting was to the USS Pegasus, under the command of Eric Pressman. He was the ship's con officer, and his youthful appearance earned him the nickname Ensign Babyface, coined by fellow crew member Lieutenant Boyan. Phil Wallace was another one of Riker's friends aboard the Pegasus. Fresh from the Academy, Riker was still somewhat serious about his work. Loyalty and obedience to his commanding officer were top priorities. Riker's ears were still ringing with the words like duty and honor. This attitude caused him to behave against the principles of the Treaty of Algernon during a crisis on board the ship. Captain Pressman had been illegally testing a prototyped phased cloaking device on board the Pegasus. This top-secret project was in violation of the Treaty of Algernon, not to mention extremely dangerous to the crew, leading most of the Pegasus officers, such as the first officer and chief engineer, to mutiny against Pressman. Riker was the only bridge crew to defend the captain, picking up a phaser and instinctively running firefight all the way to the escape pods. Only a few other crew joined Riker and Pressman. Once safely away, Riker and the others watched as the Pegasus apparently exploded, killing the remaining 71 personnel. Although Pressman commended Riker for his unquestioning loyalty, over the years Riker began to have doubts whether he had made the right decision. The Starfleet Judge Advocate General investigated the Pegasus incident, but the survivors participated in the cover-up. The Judge Advocate General discovered evidence of a mutiny on board the Pegasus before its destruction. While further investigation was recommended, Starfleet Intelligence declared the entire incident classified, and no follow-ups was ever conducted. On Beta-Z. Following the Pegasus incident, Riker was stationed on Beta-Z. While there, he met Deanna Troi. The two began a relationship which lasted several years. The Potemkin. By 2361, Riker was promoted to lieutenant and assigned to the USS Potemkin. Aboard the Potemkin, he developed a tactic which involved using a planet's magnetic pull and shutting down all systems to confuse an enemy's vessel's sensors. Later, in 2361, Riker led an away team to Nervalia 4 to rescue researchers stranded at the outpost on that world. Riker was the last to beam out. Atmospheric distortions threatened to dissipate his pattern. So the Potemkin transporter chief compensated by creating a second confinement beam. Only one beam was needed for Riker to rematerialize, so the second beam was shut down. The Potemkin crew did not realize that the second beam had, in fact, been reflected back to the planet's surface. In an odd twist of fate, the second transporter beam, which had exactly the same phase differential as the distortion field, maintained its integrity and created a duplicate William T. Riker. The duplicate Riker remained stranded on the planet's surface for the next 8 years. Up until that moment, both Rikers were the same person. As a result, both had equal claim to being the real William T. Riker. Later, Riker received promotion to Lieutenant Commander for exceptional valor during that mission. He was quickly posted to the USS Hood as first officer. The Hood. Riker's commanding officer on the Hood was Captain Robert DeSoto. His service aboard the ship was exemplary. Despite an incident where Riker refused to allow the Captain DeSoto to transport into a hostile situation on planet Altair 3. Riker was offered his first command, that of the ill-fated USS Drake, in 2364. However, he turned that down. Riker was offered his first command, that of the ill-fated USS Drake, in 2364. However, he turned down that position for a far more enticing offer. Aboard the USS Enterprise. The USS Enterprise D. First year. William Riker was promoted to commander and first officer of the newly launched USS Enterprise D in 2364. He was ferried to the planet Diablo 4 by the Hood and met the Enterprise at the planet. Combat record. Riker was an accomplished tactician, inventing several strategies while serving aboard various starships. He apparently acquired a reputation for using unorthodox solutions. As Enterprise Second Officer Data estimated, he only used traditional tactics 21% of the time. In 2365, Riker was given temporary command of the outdated USS Hathaway during a combat exercise, to ready for a Borg invasion. The Hathaway was to fight the Enterprise in a simulation designed to test the response of the crew when faced with a substantially superior enemy. Although Riker's crew managed to turn the poorly maintained Hathaway into something flyable and score several hits against the Enterprise during the initial phases of the battle. The test turned deadly when a Ferengi marauder intervened. The Enterprise believed that the Ferengi were a holograph trick designed to divert attention from the Hathaway and therefore did not raise shields. The Ferengi opponent opened fire, disabling the Enterprise's weapons and shields. The Ferengi demanded that the Enterprise hand over custody of the Hathaway, as they incorrectly assumed that the Hathaway had valuable Federation secrets on board. In order to fool the Ferengi, Riker devised a plan to have the Enterprise fire photon torpedoes at the Hathaway, which would jump to warp just before they exploded, making it appear to the Ferengi as if the Hathaway had been destroyed. Worf then fooled the Ferengi sensors into believing that a Federation ship had entered the system, scaring them away. Medical record. While leading an away team to the planet Minos in 2364, Riker was encased in a stasis field by one of the automated weapons drones, reactivated by the USS Drake. Data was able to use a phaser to free him. Later that year, Riker was absorbed by the malevolent entity Armorus on Vega 2. He was later returned to the planet unharmed, although he was completely covered in a viscous black liquid. Gregory Quinn, under the influence of neutral parasites, knocked Riker out after throwing him through a table. While exploring Sunterra 4 in 2365, Riker was struck by the thorn of a native plant. The thorn contained an organism which began to attack Riker's central nervous system and caused him to fall into a coma. Dr. Pulaski was able to stimulate certain memory centers in Riker's brain. The emotional response provided resistance to the organism, which was suspended. This was also the only clip show from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Riker's arm was broken when the Enterprise investigated an apparent distress call from the USS Essex. In 2368, his injuries prevented one of the disembodied criminals trapped there from inhabiting his body. Riker hated cats, but one of the many Enterprise crew members who attempted to care for Data's cat, Spot, Riker was in charge of feeding Spot while Data was away at a conference in late 2369, and was scratched on the forehead as he attempted to down a bowl of food. Riker later passed responsibility for Spot to Dr. Crusher, and was somewhat wary of entering Data's quarters. The Enterprise E. Riker transferred to the new USS Enterprise E in 2372, along with most of the senior staff of the Enterprise D. In 2373, the Enterprise took part in the Battle of Sector 001 against Starfleet orders. Thanks to the ship's intervention, the Borg cube was destroyed, but not before it launched a spear which generated a temporal vortex and traveled to the year 2063. The Enterprise pursued and destroyed the sphere before it could prevent the first flight of Zephyr Cochrane aboard the Phoenix warp ship. The Phoenix was damaged during the attack, and several Enterprise E crew members assisted Cochrane in repairs. Riker also needed to convince Cochrane of the importance of his first warp flight, as Cochrane considered canceling it following the Borg attack. Riker, along with Geordi LaForge, was present on board the Phoenix for Cochrane's historic flight. In 2375, Riker, along with the Enterprise crew, defied Federation orders and rebelled against the plan to relocate the Baku people from their homeworld in order to harvest the metaphasic radiation from their planet's ring system. While Picard and the rest of the senior staff protected the Baku on the planet, Riker took the Enterprise out of the Briar Patch and alerted the Federation Council to the real issue surrounding the forced relocation. During this time, Riker decided to cut his beard. After Riker's beard was cut, the Enterprise was engaged by two Sona vessels. The ship was seriously damaged in the process and forced to eject its warp core to seal a subspace tear. Riker needed to invent a new tactic on the fly, dubbed the Riker Maneuver by Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge. It involved collecting Meteron gas with the Buzzard collectors and then venting the gas while the ship continued to move. The cloud left behind the ship reacted to the isolonic weapons of the Sona ships, destroying one and crippling the other. Battle with Shinzon. Will Riker's last mission aboard the USS Enterprise E was during its encounter with the Praetor Shinzon in 2379. Although Riker was eager to begin his life aboard the Titan with Counselor Troy, he realized how important it was to stop Shinzon and was willing to sacrifice everything in order to prevent him from using his Thalion radiation weapon on her. The Scimitar fought and weakened the Enterprise in the Battle of Basin Rift, sending several boarding parties to the ship. Riker and Worf took a security detail to fight off the invading Remans. The Viceroy entered the Jeffrey tubes and attempted to reach the bridge and kidnap Captain Picard. Riker followed, and they fought hand-to-hand, with Riker eventually killing the Viceroy by knocking him down an Enterprise maintenance shaft. Command offers. Riker was offered several commands during his tenure aboard the Enterprise. In addition to the aforementioned USS Drake, he was offered the USS Ares in 2365 and the USS Melbourne in 2366. By 2379, Riker decided to accept promotion to captain of the USS Titan, assuming command of the ship that year. Troy also transferred to the Titan. The Titan was dispatched to the Romulan neutral zone to serve as a command ship for diplomatic task force.